the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. I'm Jen Mauro, and with me is Mike Walsh.
I'm laughing because...
Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because every time we do a podcast where someone decides to write down their intro beforehand, it always has that same sort of stilted way about it as opposed to the usual, loosey-goosey way of doing things that we typically do. But I like it. In the early years, I used to get accused of this podcast sounding too much like NPR, so it was a nice sort of like coming back to that. So I appreciate that.
I'm
nice.
actually just afraid I'm going to stumble over hello right in the beginning, so I thought I should just write it down.
I respect that. That is a good choice. How are you today, Jen?
I'm actually really well. It's been a great day.
Well, you say that in a way like you wouldn't have ordinarily anticipated having a good day?
It's true. I do say that. Now, I just spent some time with our diocesan community today down in the schools and met some new people, and met a lot of great kids and principals and teachers, so it was a great day.
Well, you want to tell people what you were at?
Sure, why not? I was at St. Rose of Lima School today in Haddon Heights, where the children had worked, and the school had worked with the state police to collect items for the Afghan refugees that are being housed at the military post.
Cool.
So it was really great that they did an amazing job. They filled three trucks full of items. And they were really excited to help the state police load everything up. And they talked a lot about how their Catholic faith calls them to do this. So it was very uplifting.
That's wonderful. I wish I could have been there. That would have been a great experience. But I'm glad that so many people were there, and I'm glad that they did such an amazing job that they filled 3 truckloads of stuff. That is truly shocking. Did they happen to say over how long a period of time they were doing the collection?
Only 2 weeks.
My goodness.
Yeah.
They did all that in 2 weeks?
The stage was completely full of bags and baby strollers and diapers and toys. And you know what I really found touching is that your immediate reaction might be, really, toys? So we have to send this? But, the kids were really excited to send toys because they wanted to make sure that their counterparts from Afghanistan, these other young kids, that they had some sense of comfort. And that's why they wanted to send those things to them. Like, they know that they're out of their homes and they might not know anybody, but here we go. We got some nice toys to make you feel more like home.
You know what? That's really wonderful. And I'm glad it came from our Catholic schools. It shows the charity that our kids were taught in Catholic schools. And I really appreciate that. That's wonderful. That's truly wonderful.
It was truly. It was a great way to start a morning.
Yeah. Oh, and I was stuck in a meeting instead. I wish I was there.
Aww.
What are you going to do? I know. Oh, it was a nice meeting. It went well, but it was a meeting nonetheless. Well, that's good. Well, this has been a busy week in the diocese. Last weekend, as we talked about in the last podcast, we distributed our bishop's medals and opened the synod, and that was a lot of fun. And it was actually, I thought it was one of the most joyous days I've had in a very long time. Say almost 2 years, as a matter of fact. I might even venture to say since the pandemic began. It was probably the biggest event we've had, the most joyful event. It was a great opportunity of an opening of this great process of the synod. So I know I said this in the last podcast, but I really hope people will take it upon themselves to be active participants in their parishes as they're working through the synod process at the parish level, which only lasts a very short period of time. I think just November and December, and then it moves to the next level, which would be the deanery level. So if you want to take part in it, reach out to your parishes now. And if you haven't heard what synod work that they're doing, make sure you bug your pastor about it because, it's possible they got distracted. Of course, not in the Diocese of Camden, but in other dioceses, that might have been the case. Our pastors are right on the board with this. No dragging their feet at all. It's wonderful. We have such great soldiers here.
Well, everybody that I saw at the synod looked very excited to be there, and I saw a lot of, prayer-filled eyes, so to speak, since there were a lot of masks. But and then I watched it again on the live stream video on the Diocese of Camden's YouTube video, just to hear Bishop's homily again, because it was very uplifting.
It was a great uplifting homily, and then watching, we gave out 75 bishops' medals, and I think about 60 people were there to receive them, and just watching them it was actually very touching. They went to people who have been working in the diocese for a long time, and our own Jim McBride, our retired photographer of 50 years for the paper, just retired a year or two ago. Received one, and Bishop made a particular note of his dedication to the diocese, which is actually the topic of today's podcast, and that is working for the church. And I don't mean that in the way of you had a call and you decided to become a priest or a sister or something like that. I mean, you're just a working schmo like me, and you decided that, you know, someone commented or told you about a job opening for the church, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And you decide to jump ship where you are, in my case, corporate law, to come work for the church. And what a unique experience it is. Now, you and I have actually worked for the church for a very short period of time, in my mind.
Yeah.
I've worked for the church 6 years this month, as a matter of fact. And you've been working for the church for how long?
This actually would be my 6th year.
Oh, look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew? And you came from the, soulless world of journalism, and I came from the soulless world of corporate law. And why did you come and join the... You first started out with the Diocese of Trenton, right?
Yes, I started there first, but actually today at Haddon Heights at the school, when I got in my car to drive away, I said, this is why I work for the church.
Really?
To report this kind of news instead of, the accidents on the parkway or, what's going on around like that. Yeah, deaths. Murders, floods, deaths. I jumped ship, as you would say. I don't know if that's the right word for what I did. That might be your case. But
that's what I did. Absolutely, I jumped
no shame.
Ship. No shame at all.
Yeah, because I wanted to make a difference. You know what? This is so cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. I wanted to be part of the solution, not the problem.
You're right. That is cliche. But in this case, it's apropos. Because that was sort of, for me, it was I'd worked long enough with not the angels that I thought it was about time I worked with the angels for a little while. I literally had to feed my soul. That's why I've been doing a lot of soulless work, and similarly, I felt the need to come here. And now we've only worked for the church for 6 years apiece. Most of the people I've worked with have worked for the church for decades.
Yeah.
And for the first 6 years I've worked here, I couldn't figure out why nobody ever left. And then we did a series. So we're having this big job fair, right?
Right.
In November for the Diocese of Camden. Remember what the day is?
I do. It's on November 10th. It will be held at the Church of St. Mary in Cherry Hill from 3 to 7 p.m.
Perfect. And very easy to access church in Cherry Hill. So what we've been wanting to do is kind of promote the value of working for the church and talk to a few people who have been working for the church for quite a while, because we gave out all these bishops' medals, and I was amazed. They were given out in various years, right? So 10 plus years, 25 plus years, and 40 plus years. And I remember talking to the Vicar General and going, how many 40 plus years people are we going to find? Because the concept of working someplace for 40 years is just completely foreign to me. As someone who, this is now the longest I've ever worked anywhere. And I was amazed that if we gave out 25, if we had, I want to say we gave out 20 medals for people who were there 40 years or more, and I'm flummoxed by that. Do you want to stay here for 40 years?
Wow, way to put me on the spot.
No problem.
Yes, Michael Walsh, I do want to stay here for 40 years. Yes.
All right, well, that's good.
Actually, you know what? I would absolutely love to work for the church as long as humanly possible.
Really?
I love the people I meet.
Really?
Yeah. The last 6 years have been the best years of my professional life.
As much as I fill this podcast with sarcasm and jaded, there's a word I'm looking for that I can't pull right now, but a sepia tone of jadedness that I think I tend to agree completely with you that the reason I love working here is because I love the people I work with. They are genuinely wonderful human beings. So we wanted to highlight that a little bit. And for those who are listening who have never had the opportunity to work for the church, that it really is an amazing experience. And if you know of someone who may have, a talent that the church could put to use, consider this job fair or any job fairs, or check out the employment sections of your local diocese or your local parish and consider it. So today we brought in 3 people of varying backgrounds, of varying times associated with the church, and we wanted to sort of talk to them a little bit about why they came here, and if it was for as jaded as reasons as you and I.
I bet it's not.
I bet you
Maybe it is. Yes, so with us today we have Karen Fisher. She is the manager of parish-based senior programs for Vitality, the Diocese Healthcare Ministry. Do I have that right, Karen?
Yes, you do.
Great. Yep. We have Dr. Bill Watson. He is the Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Diocese of Camden. Thank you, Bill.
It's my pleasure to be here.
And We also have Kevin Hickey, the Executive Director of Catholic Charities, Diocese of Camden. So, pretty excited to have everybody. Was that a little too NPR for you,
Nice
Mike?
to be here, although I will say, Jennifer, just so the audience knows, you let me know about 20 minutes ago that you want to be on this.
That is typically how we do things around here. Fair. Which is why we all work for the church, because we're willing to step up when asked.
Yes, and you rallied. I'm
I
so
see.
excited.
By the way, do Dr. Watson and Mr. Hickey have other titles by any chance?
I think they should tell us about them themselves.
Okay, we'll get to that later. We like to joke around that there are a number of us who were named secretaries of different divisions of the diocese, and we all are very humble about using it, but every time we have to introduce ourselves, people ask, do you want to be called the Secretary for Communications? Like, no, I'm good. Just Director of Communications is fine. So anyway, thank the three of you for joining us today. So I kind of want to, I'm trying to think, who's been, I think it's you, Kevin. You've been working for the church the longest, I believe.
That could be.
It's been quite a while. Where'd you get your start in church life?
I got my start in church life on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation.
Wow.
So that's 1975. But apropos of the nature of this podcast, I jumped ship. Yeah, I went away from the church.
You did?
Yeah, oh, yeah. I got filled with visions of grandeur when I went to graduate school. And I got my head, way up there, or my nose way up there. So I can talk more about that later. But, yeah, I jumped ship because then I worked for Catholic Charities in Chicago, Catholic Charities West Virginia, and then I went away for 20 years.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You did jump ship.
So there's hope for me yet. All right.
Yeah. So, and then I came back. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the first question is, what got you into Catholic life to begin with?
Well, I just was saying to some of the younger staff, and incidentally, I'd really, for younger people, the job fair would be a great opportunity to maybe find a place. And even if you don't think you want to stay somewhere for a long time, you get really good formation. Say Catholic Charities, or I'm sure all the other offices within the diocese too. What was the question?
What brought you to Catholic life?
Okay, yes. Thank you, Michael. I was just talking to some younger colleagues. It was St. Louis University where I went undergrad, and I was educated by Jesuits and imbued with that whole sense of being a person for others, social justice, social action. So it was a natural fit to go to the Indian Reservation after I graduated, and then Chicago and West Virginia. So that's what brought me to it. And I had a moment, you were talking about being with the kids this morning. I still remember driving to Detroit, Michigan in 1976 for this, what became somewhat of a notorious conference in Catholic social ministry. And, of course, that was the bicentennial. And this was, so it was filled with, Michael, a bunch of radicals. And came up with this wild blueprint for the church, anyways, I remember driving from West Virginia. The driver was a deacon. He was a coal miner. This Chevy, what are those big old Suburban kind of things?
Oh, sure. Yeah, right.
It was like 10 of us in this thing.
Okay.
And, it was dark, and we would stop at crazy places for coffee. And I just thought, this is fantastic. What a wild ride. What interesting people. This deacon, the coal miner, he was an electrician. He worked in the mines.
Wow.
His idea of a good time in the mines when he was having lunch was to turn his lights off.
Oh, my goodness.
And he's sitting there, and he was describing, I still remember this as we're driving on the interstate, he's describing the silence of the earth. And then, but you can hear the earth moving, which, of course, would be terrifying to me.
Sure.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Anyway, so that was my introduction. So, I'll fast forward, I remembered that years later, that fit.
Yeah.
So that's what brought me back. So, well, enough about me. Now tell me, what do you think of me?
I think your first story is as peculiar as I anticipated. Thank you for not disappointing. So, Bill, how about you? What brought you to Catholic life? Please tell me of some other form of hippiness.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it depends who you ask. I was I actually also started after college in Catholic school, teaching in a Catholic school, and I was part of the Alliance for Catholic Education, which is a program out of the University of Notre Dame, which was specifically to take young college graduates, Catholic college graduates, and to teach in the Southeast at the time, where there were not.
Is that where you went undergrad?
No, I was Tulane University. So, yeah, so I got in. So I got connected with Notre Dame I'd like to say a providential way. So I toward the end of my time at Tulane, you have to sort of figure out what you're going to do, and I thought, well, maybe Teach for America would be for me, because I'd always thought about being a teacher and so forth. So I got all my application materials together. I submitted that, whatever. I went to the interview day, and all that. And while I was sort of pretty fresh off of that, my mom sent me an article from the Notre Dame Alumni magazine. My brother is a graduate of Notre Dame. And she said, "Bill, this looks, kind of interesting." And it was this fledgling program, at that time 4 years old, or 4 years young, called the Alliance for Catholic Education. And it was for, for shorthand, kind of a Catholic school, Teach for America. So I thought, well, maybe I'll apply to that too. But the deadline for application was in 3 days by the time I got the article and read it. So I called and I said, can I still get my stuff in? And they said, sure, go ahead and, submit it, whatever. So anyway, I got my materials in for that. And then shortly thereafter, I had a phone interview, and then I flew to Notre Dame for an in-person interview. So I thought, well, maybe they like the application. So then when it came time to kind of make a decision, I was informed by Teach for America that I wasn't selected. So I didn't get Teach for America, and then I was informed by ACE that they wanted me to come and join that cohort. So I like to think that is, I think the Lord knows that I sometimes agonize over decisions and make them especially personal ones, and make them very difficult. And I like to think that was God giving me a hand there toward the end of my college career and saying, this one's for you. Either that or thinking, boy, I really don't want him to mess this one up. You should take that one. So anyhow, I ended up as a 7th and 8th grade religion and math and science teacher in Mobile, Alabama. And then did that for 2 years in the program, and then stayed around for a third year. And then I went, and another thing that I'd always sort of thought about was to work in a science museum. And Mobile had a science museum, so I was hired there as the director of education. So I left the church as well, or working for the church anyway. From there, went to graduate school, and then got a job at a bigger museum. I worked at the Smithsonian, at the Museum of Natural History.
I didn't know that. Wow. Yeah,
and I did that for 4 or 5 years. And what really drew me back, I have to say, was just this feeling that I can tell you specifically, it was right around the time of the Sandy Hook shootings. Sure. And I was deeply saddened by that. And I remember sitting in my house, and my wife was there, and I just remember saying to her, there's so much sadness in the world, and there's so much good to be done, and I'm not doing any of it. And that was sort of the moment when I started looking, to come back to working for the church, and one thing led to another. The position at the time of Director of Curriculum and Assessment was available here, and I had grown up in this diocese. At the time, I was obviously living in Northern Virginia, so I could work in Washington. And I was selected for that position, and I've been here ever since, and then subsequently became the superintendent. And that's not to say, I just as a footnote to that story, that's not to say that the work that the people who work at the Smithsonian are doing is not important, but I feel like, having been a Catholic school teacher and gotten a taste of what the kind of work that I felt God was calling me to do was, and it became clear to me that I was no longer doing that kind of work, that kind of good. So I was very blessed to be able to find a pathway back.
That's wonderful. I'm also enjoying people leave the church and working for the church and come back again. That's always good to hear too.
Yeah, it's very uplifting.
Yeah. So, Karen, what about you?
Well,
did you work in Mobile, Alabama at all, or on an Indian reservation?
Okay. My story is nowhere near as exciting.
No, that means that your story probably sounds a lot like mine.
It doesn't involve a deacon and a suburban?
No, it doesn't. No travel, none of that. I'm just a worker bee, like most people are, I guess you would want to say. And I guess my work life began after I got out of college. I went to LaSalle University. I'm a Philly girl originally, so we moved over to New Jersey after I got married, and so I'm originally a Philly girl, went to LaSalle and majored in business, finance, and had visions of myself going up the corporate ladder and making lots of money and,
I had those same visions.
Yes, and, that was the dream. And then after getting married and moving here, and then we started our family, and suddenly that dream didn't really feel so important anymore. And so I took some time off and started to raise our family. And once the kids got to school age, I thought, well, I think I'm ready now. I can jump back into the workforce. So, but I didn't want to have a career where it was all consuming. I just knew myself enough to know that I wouldn't be able to balance life and career and have the family that I wanted to have, meaning family first. And coming from a background of finance, I knew that if you go back into the corporate world, often, that's your priority first. It's very hard to fit the family in around that. So that was my priority. So I ended up at my parish school. Our parish was creating a pre-K program, a four-year-old pre-K program. And I met, the principal called me and asked if I would be interested in helping with that process. And so she introduced me to the person who they chose as the teacher, who happens to be Bobby Bradley, or was Bobby Bradley. And that's when I first met her. And Bobby Bradley, for those that don't know, was the director of the senior ministry at St. Peter's when they created the senior ministry there. And then she eventually even came to work at Vitality, and now she's over at Sacred Heart working for the diocese with the retired priests. So that was my first introduction to Bobby and the process of creating the school and the program. So we did that for a couple of years, and then they made some changes, and the program was no longer financially, I guess, they decided to go in a different direction. So I ended up at the Moorestown School District in New Jersey, and I worked there for 11 years as an aide in the classrooms, working with children who had disabilities or learning issues, behavior issues, and those kinds of things. So I did that for 11 years. And then after that time, I began to feel that I wanted something a little more meaningful to me. And I just felt like I was being called. It was the oddest feeling because I'd never experienced that before. And so I just started putting my feelers out and looking around. And Bobby again entered my world, and she suggested that I apply for the graduate program at Villanova in church management. And I kept saying, oh, I don't have time for that, I can't do that, and I kept finding reasons not to do it. So, for example, I said, oh, it's too expensive, I don't have the money for that, and it turned out that the diocese paid a third, and your parish paid a third, and you pay a third, and the Villanova cut the tuition 50%, and I thought, I can't not do this. There's never going to be another opportunity for a graduate degree in this way. So I went ahead and I did that. And then I graduated from that. And I thought, now what do? I have this degree. I need to do something with it. So I started looking around, and I saw an ad in the Star Herald for an administrative assistant in the Vitality program. And Vitality Catholic Healthcare Services was a new ministry for the diocese, and so I thought, well, I kind of like the idea of getting in on the ground floor and working my way through because I want to know what it is. I want to see what the program is all about and learn as I go. So the idea of working for the church, as both Bill and Kevin experienced, was, I don't know if I really want to go. That tug of the corporate world was still there. And I thought, I don't know about working for the church, but I kept saying no, but this ad kept coming back to me. Every time I opened the paper, there it was, and I kept reading it, and no. And then a friend of mine that works at the diocese called me, and she said, you should apply for that job. You would be perfect for that job. And I thought, I don't know about that. So I said, I'll go just to practice my interviewing skills for my real job that I'll get after this. And I came in for the interview with Deacon Jerry, and everything just fell into place. It just felt right. I felt good about it. And when I learned what Vitality was, it just seemed like a good fit for me. There's 6 different ministries and so much good outreach that they do. So I accepted the position, and that was 6 years ago.
About 6 years.
Something in the 6s. Mm-hmm. So I started there, and I just recently changed positions within Vitality to the manager of parish-based senior programs. And I'm very happy with that. And again, I started the same way. I started with the little ones, and now I'm working with the seniors.
Right.
And they're just wonderful. I just love working with the seniors. And there's just so much good work being done in the ministries here. And it just feels right. Feels like a good fit.
That's a good story. You mentioned something that I also think is important when you were talking about raising a family, and that's one thing that I know I like working with the church as well. Like, I feel that the church is very what is the word I'm looking for?
Open, embracing.
Yeah, observant. The fact that you have a family, and what we do in all of our different ministries can be very taxing and long hours, but family comes first. And I feel like working for the church, that has always been something that's been made very, very apparent, and that they look out for your family and yourself, or you can't do your own ministry.
Right.
Yeah, our superintendent of schools has 27 kids. That dude
like that sometimes.
No, what, five kids, right?
5, yes.
Right, 5 kids.
It's always, when, but I'd like to just echo that, you definitely, the church is very, very family friendly. I mean, the family is the nucleus of the church, right? So, and that's just very evident, and that, I think I've always felt very, very supported. Even the times when it feels like there's 27 kids, and there are only 5.
So Kevin, at this table, you've probably done the most hiring in your position as an executive director here and elsewhere. When you're like, what do you look for? I've often said that I've been in a few hiring opportunities with you, and your interview process is completely different than anything I'd ever seen before. For one thing, it involved things like prayer and the Holy Spirit, and coming from the corporate world, that was all, something that I couldn't ever even begin to imagine being part of the perspective of potential candidates for a job. What do you look at or look for when you are interviewing somebody, or when you hear from a candidate shows an interest in a job?
So we'll echo Pope Emeritus Benedict, who talks about what are the qualities of somebody working in a Caritas agency like Catholic Charities. And so he says, first is professional competence, and then the second is heart formation. So, I'm thinking of some of the interviews you and I have participated in, and as I think about what Pope Benedict just sketched out, in those interviews, you would focus on professional competence, which meant I was like, okay, fine, he can do that. That's fine. And I'm going to focus on this other thing, heart formation. And what I think is helpful in Catholic Charities are people who are aware or, in fact, have experienced their own vulnerability, their own, dare I say, brokenness. because that is what, well, of course, the whole world is broken, but this is our stock and trade, obviously. People who are wounded and, are carrying around a lot of trauma. And so staff members' own sense of their vulnerability, maybe even their own trauma that they've experienced, is that combined with professional competence is, that's where I think we're looking for. And it doesn't mean that we're looking for people to come in and start sobbing in the interview. No, that's not that. It's just their own sense. And, sometimes that'll come out. It did come out in someone that we know well.
Yeah.
And who is a wonderful, wonderful staff person. So there's that. I'm also, we are not, we are a bridge institution from the church into the world. And so, that's a complex undertaking. So we're looking for bright people. So I'll stop there. How's that?
Well, that's good.
All right.
Jenny, you want to say something?
I just want to hear more about the interview between the sad part of the world, that's you, Mike, and the heart of Kevin. I find that very interesting, the interview process here.
We probably should go back and ask people, well, we have someone who's in the other room who's experienced being interviewed by the two of us. And I would not want to be that person, because I distinctly remember, he leans into it, right? Mm-hmm. And he's sort of, he's got this.
Swagger?
Yeah, swagger.
Okay.
And this particular interview I remember is I'm sitting there like bored. Because I thought, okay, this is not interesting, and then this person said something, and I distinctly remember sitting straight up. Because that's what it was the interesting to me. It's like, okay, there's something there.
And you know how typically there's two sides to a story.
That's my side, and that's the best side.
You know what? Well, here's the thing: so that was an interview that he and I took, and I saw that happen. Like I witnessed his change from why am I here to this person has really piqued my interest, and it was he has no poker face of any kind.
That's true.
And it's true. I think in that same interview we got into an argument in the middle of the interview as well. That's a distinct possibility.
I really want to be a fly on the wall in the next interview.
Can you imagine being interviewed by the two of
Bill
us?
shaking his head no.
Mike and I have interviewed people together. And I'm just thinking about how brutal those are. Professional competence on one hand and professional competence on the other hand.
The heart formation.
We got to bring Kevin in next time we interview something. Holy cow!
But it's true though. To Kevin's credit, and I've said this many times, he has a skill set that I don't possess, and thank God he has it. That he's able to find that soul in a person, whereas I work in a very soulless job. As you guys were talking, I was thinking about. You've each sort of explained why you came to the church, and. I was thinking about why I came to the church, and it was for all of the most selfish reasons. It really was.
What?
I remember
Let's
specifically. I came, but they were. I came to the church because I had worked in nonprofits once before, actually a couple times before. But
yeah, we don't need to hear where you worked in what nonprofit.
Okay, that's fine. Volunteers in America Delaware Valley under the wise instruction of Dan Lombardo, the CEO. But while I was there, I kind of got this taste for nonprofit life. And the thing that I really loved about it, aside from the fact that I was never bored, was that you didn't just work one job, you worked a dozen jobs. I did everything while I was there, and it was great. Then I decided that I wanted to make money, to Karen's point. So I went and did corporate law for several years and sold my soul, made a ton of money, sold my soul, and really didn't find anything about it fulfilling. So, but one of the things that I also didn't find fulfilling about it is I was doing one job all the time, the same thing, in a cubicle, one job.
Mm.
And there were great things that went with it. I worked in a high rise, I made a lot of money, had great food, 5-star events, all that kind of stuff. I traveled all over the country. That stuff was wonderful, but there was no soul nourishment at all. But more importantly, it was also professionally draining. More important to me at that time. So I knew if I came here, I was going to get the opportunity again to do 1,000 different things and actually work on my professional development. I was a very good marketer, but I had virtually no experience and no significant experience in crisis communications other than a few things that I had done in the past, but nothing on a regular basis. So I wanted to come to the church and pick up all of those skill sets that I wasn't able to find anyplace else, because working for people might think of the diocese as this big lumbering entity, but actually particularly our diocese is run on a shoestring budget, and we don't have a ton of extra staff, so you do a ton of other stuff. I spent last week in spreadsheets, and I should be nowhere near a spreadsheet, but it's because somebody had to do it, and that person was going to be me. I also do a lot of heavy lifting. I lift a lot of big boxes. Although not for Karen, as she was bringing in big boxes today, but I did hold the door open for her.
Totally ignored me. Here I am struggling to open the door, but he did hold the door, so I have to give him that.
Professional competency.
She's good. She's a strong woman. She doesn't need me to carry anything.
Handle it.
So I came here selfishly, which was to pick up all these different skill sets. And while it wasn't done for the soul fulfilling reasons that the rest of you did it for, truthfully, it was really to pick up those skill sets. I've had the benefit of everything else and the benefit of incredible professional development because of my time here. I haven't learned how to be nicer to people, but I have learned how to do all these jobs in an important way. It's true, though.
Can I just throw you under the bus here at least a little?
Don't ruin my reputation.
Oh, never mind. I better stop talking then.
I like it when people think I'm mean.
I will say, just before, that idea about versatility, I think is really, really, that resonates with me a lot too. There's really never a dull moment, and that may just, I don't know if that's, I think that's in part the nature of ministry. To your point, Mike, that there's so many needs to be met, and we're here to meet them, and whatever that takes to do, and that we have a small number of very, very dedicated people to do that. And so certainly that's true of working in the diocese, and that's very appealing to me. My experience, my largest experience in the diocese is with schools, and I can absolutely assure you that is the case for anybody who works in a school, whether it's the principal or the teachers or an aide or the secretary or the maintenance person or someone who works in the cafeteria. Yes, you have your job, but there's always that sort of last line in the job description, which is other duties as assigned. Yeah. And sometimes, you feel like maybe the font ought to be bigger on that. But that's, I don't say that as a way to say, there's any kind of bait and switch or anything like that. I think this work really appeals to people who appreciate the versatility and sharing their talents in many different ways to meet many different needs, or at least being open to God working through us to meet those needs, especially where our own competencies are not sufficient for that. So there's a lot of truth, and it was an eye-opening experience for me, because to sort of go back to what Kevin said earlier and about looking for the heart of things. I remember the first major event I had working at the diocese, one of the first major ones, but it was a big one. And I was really aware it was a major event. It was going to be 4 days long. It was the convocation of Catholic leaders in South Jersey. Big deal, being held in Atlantic City at a big conference hall, like 600 people there. Big thing. I'd worked on bigger, but this was the first one I'd worked on for the diocese. And every time I do events, I worry so much about them. Like, I just want to make sure everything is done right. And I remember the Vicar General, Father Hughes, pulling me aside by myself, because I was really kind of not freaking out, but I was like, man, how are we going to? I have no trust that this is going to happen. I have no faith in anything. This is it. Where do we have to? He's like, Mike, you have the Holy Spirit on your side. And my initial reaction to that was to laugh out loud, because I had come from an area where we didn't rely on the Holy Spirit. We relied on graphs and lawsuits. That was how we were going to be certain that something was going to be done. And the threat of lawsuits anyway, and liability and things of that nature. And he was like, Mike, you have the Holy Spirit on your side. It's going to be fine. And the truth of the matter was, the Holy Spirit has done more in my professional life than I think I've ever realized, and sort of
to what Bill was saying earlier about how things sort of like fall in place. Like sometimes God takes over and he's like, okay, let me help you with this. And Karen, you kind of said the same thing. And it's a weird thing to think about as a professional. I have to believe in your time in journalism, Jen, there wasn't a lot of time when you were expecting the Holy Spirit to really help with that deadline.
No, not at all. And it's funny you're talking about this because I've already had a few instances here where I don't know what's going on the front page. That's a full disclosure right there. And the next day, these amazing assignment will drop in our lap, and there's the front cover. There it is. It's I'll go home at the end of the night going, what are we gonna do? And an event comes up, and we shoot the photos and do it a story, and it turns out to be perfect. And what's interesting is there are times that I leave the office saying, okay, well, see you guys tomorrow, see the staff tomorrow, we'll work on this story together, and one of the staffers will say, we'll just pray on it, and tomorrow we'll regroup. It'll be okay. I'll say a prayer for it tonight.
Wait, one of your staffers,
yes,
that is my staffer,
yes,
recommends praying for something?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to need that person's name after this podcast.
But you know what? That would never happen.
No.
Well, it could happen, but it wouldn't be that.
It would be atypical.
Exactly.
Yeah, of
and
corporate world.
It actually makes me stop almost every time. And that's disturbing to me, saying, hold on, why did that make me stop? And turn around and say, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Pete Sanchez, for saying that.
He is a good man, that Pete Sanchez.
He is.
He's a good, our staff writer is a good, faithful person who writes well and has a perspective that his associate publisher does not always possess, which is good. What about you? I'm curious, Karen, as someone who works in Vitality, and you have a fairly sizable staff up here. I see them because they keep talking outside my office door. When you're talking with your colleagues,
that's why we do it.
Mike. It's community.
That's a topic for a different podcast.
You're going to want to go up the hallway a little bit further for community. But when you're talking to your colleagues, I mean, what do they say about? I mean, you have a lot of hardened nurses in Vitality who have seen everything in hospitals and other medical venues. When they come to work here, like, is it a new experience for them, or like, what kind of stuff have they said?
Well, I do think that the idea of working in a religious environment touches all of us and strengthens all of us, because I feel like in the corporate world you can never voice or be very make it known that that's part of what you do and how you get your answers. But when you work here, what I love about it is you can always pray in the middle of anything. Everybody can just drop what they're doing, just say a prayer and bring it all back to God, which is who's orchestrating all of this anyway. And I think all of our nurses who have been in the trenches and have, as you mentioned, seen so much, it's comforting to work in an environment where you can lean on the Holy Spirit, you can lean on God, you have another tool in your toolbox to get you through what they face every day. And our care coordinators, I'm telling you, they face situations, and in Catholic Charities, I'm sure they see the same things. The need is so great out there, and people are hurting, and they are sick, and they need help, and they don't know where to go to get it. And the pressure of finding that help for some of these people who are so desperate, children and families and seniors, they just don't know where to go to get the help that they need. And so sometimes that pressure can be really tough to deal with, and to have that as part of your workday, to know that that's okay to pray, and to even bring up the notion of praying to handle a problem or to handle a situation. It's a wonderful way to work. It's a peaceful way to work. It brings such peace to the environment, and that's what I love about it. It just brings me closer to my faith.
Yeah.
And I don't have to be embarrassed about that, and you can talk about it, and it's okay.
Right.
And that's what I love about working in this environment.
I like that you use the word tool in the toolbox, because I know, that people who may be listening to this thinking, well, I don't know, like the Bible like the back of my hand. Can I still apply for a job in the Diocese of Camden? When Mike and I were speaking during my interview, I told him I'm not a cradle Catholic. I grew up more Lutheran, and I went through my sacraments as an adult. I'm a journalist. I don't know the Bible like the back of my hand. And Mike said, I want a journalist.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what's the Bible? And he said, I want a journalist. And that really brought some peace of mind to me, knowing that, okay, he's looking for the skills I have and to bring those skills to the church. And so I think that's important for anybody who wants to apply for the job or just check out the job fair to know we're looking for your skills to use them here for the church. We don't need you to have, all of this theology behind it.
I wanted to dovetail on that because I've actually been in the room with the bishop and the vicar general when they have been telling the priests of the diocese, the pastors of the diocese, that they need to be hiring from the experts within their midst, because every parish has people like me of some degree or another, has people like you of some degree of another, everybody around this table of some degree or another. There's a lot of talent out there. And I have this statement on my whiteboard in my office. It was said by Cardinal Tobin, and basically it says that a budget is a theological document, which is when you create your budget, you are showing where you are going to put the resources, in that case of a parish or a diocese or a ministry or whatever. These are the things we are going to focus on. So if there are things that your parish would be supported by hiring someone in some capacity to do that work, then you're showing that there is a theological element. You are supporting Catholicism by hiring a professional to do that job. Maybe it's a part-time job, maybe it's a full-time job. Who knows? But looking for real. And sometimes I think in the church we rely on volunteers just a little too much. People who are good-hearted, but may not have the professional development to do some of the stuff. And that's kind of goes back to when Kevin and I have to hire people, is I keep looking for the professional development, which he does too, to his credit. It's just that's the only thing I'm focused on, and he's also looking at the spiritual side. So maybe I err too far on the side of professionalism, but I would encourage people to, working for the church isn't the kind of thing. I feel like there's this weird reputation that working for the church means something lesser, when in reality it's some of the most skilled people I've ever met in my entire life, and that if you want to honor the church and the work that the church does, then you should be hiring people who can professionally support it to the degree you would want them to support it. Right, Kevin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well said.
And Kevin, I want to know, we never got back to what brought you back to the church, did we? After the 2020 year
hiatus.
Yeah, I was,
in the cave.
I was having a nice series of conversations with a monk. And
of course he was.
Like you do.
Yeah, which happens to all of us. I know that.
Was it on top of a mountain?
Or was it back in a Suburban again?
No, it was overseas, and I was looking back across the ocean, and sort of metaphorically, and just thinking about things, that I'd done, and I did go back to West Virginia. And I do, that drive from West Virginia to Detroit, Michigan is etched in my head, because and then the other thing, the other memory of Detroit was I remember sitting in this hall, and this big banner up there was it said Catholic Charities. Now I can't explain this, but I'm sure it's got to be the spirit. I just was connecting to those two words. So so now fast forward, and I'm overseas, and I'm looking back across the Atlantic Ocean, and I'm remembering that. And what I realized is, there was a fit. I didn't get into the call, or it was just I fit there. So I thought, when I come back, I'm going to explore this. So here I am. So that's what happened. So
I like that.
Did one of you say something? Yeah, Kevin, you were the one that was talking about broken people. Was that a Catholic Charities thing, or was that a Catholicism thing that you meant? That we're all a little bit broken and we can find some healing here in the church?
I wasn't speaking to that. I was speaking to the awareness and one's own sensitivity to that. And so in Catholic Charities, that's we have all these broken people. I liken what we do to, if you can think about a party and you have, people who are standing on the sidelines. And for us, those are poor people, victims of domestic violence, migrants, immigrants, whatever, and they don't really feel like they're included in the dance of life. So if you have a sense of your own vulnerability, brokenness, whatever, you'll be natural to want to bring these people into the dance of life. So that's what I was thinking about. And I hasten to add, any young people, Catholic Charities, as Mr. Walsh knows, is not filled with pious people.
I'm well aware.
There's a fair amount of, at times, blue language because of what's going on and our own frustrations. And, we never have enough of anything, money, staff, time, whatever. So we're pressed. But again, there's this, it is remarkable. I'm talking about Catholic Charities specifically, but I think Vitality and Catholic Schools represent the three things the church has built in this country: health, education, and social services, to go into the world. So they're really remarkable institutions. There's meaning to this, and I think people are looking for meaning. So I remember 9/11, and I was in Memphis at the time, and we encountered so many people that were envious of this work, this meaning that they assumed was going on in Catholic Charities in this case. And so I think, we need to sell that because I think people are, looking for meaning, obviously.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
Yeah.
And don't worry, there's lots of blue language in the communications department, too.
I've heard. I would like to come to the Monday meeting?
You're welcome anytime, Kevin.
Yes, I've heard about
Beat me
this.
to that, Mike.
Yes.
We're not allowed to use that language with kids in schools, so don't come to us.
Oh, look at Bill. He's looking very angelic.
So Bill, I mean, you've done some hiring in your past, a lot of principals and stuff like that. You look for similar things?
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, I think I joke about only looking for professional competency, but there's a definitely I think we all know that a prerequisite of the job is to have a relationship with God, because that's who we are. But I also feel like it's important to say everybody's on a journey. You say it's not Catholic Charities isn't filled with pious people, but I don't think any place is necessarily. But I think we're all on a journey. So there's no I would imagine for some people hearing this, they've heard us talk and they could imagine themselves sitting around this table because of similar experiences. There are probably other people who are wondering if they would fit in. But I would say everyone who is everyone who's a Catholic is on their own journey, is on their own faith journey, and has a relationship with God, which gives you a seat at the table, so to speak. So I wouldn't use that as a if I were a person listening to this thinking about maybe a career transition or a workplace transition, I wouldn't use that as a limiting factor. Because if you're even listening to this, then I think you're already there.
Yeah.
So just wanted to highlight that. But you do when you're hiring people, you to your point, Mike, you do look for the professional competencies, but there's a lot of learning about each other, which is, I think, what we do in the ministry too.
And Jen, that's something you've commented to me a couple of times, both at your time in the Diocese of Trenton and then when you upgraded to the Diocese of Camden. You talked about...
that was a good one.
Thank you. You talked about
Just
how...
slip those right in, and I don't see them coming, and I should by now. I really should.
But in all seriousness, you talk... And I almost felt bad about hiring you away from the Diocese of Trenton, because you talked about the familial relationship you had with your coworkers, and that is something that I do see here all the time. To my own chagrin, most of the time, is just how much of a family it feels like. So the communication staff and the monitor staff that you worked with there, you said that one of the most difficult parts of coming here was leaving them.
Yes.
But then you also said one of the things that you're happiest about here is sort of like everyone feels like family in the Catholic Star Herald, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I can't say there haven't been days that I cried at the beginning leaving the monitor closer family, because they were family. I was only there 5 years. I think I was closer to those employees than I've ever been in the 15 years before that in a professional capacity. But at the same time, the Herald has welcomed me with open arms, and already gotten to know some amazing stories from them that they opened up and shared with me right away, and vice versa. And they were heartfelt stories, like stories you don't just tell somebody you just meet, and they're stories that you share with somebody that you plan to make a good friend and a family member. So yeah. I feel like that with a lot of people I've met here.
And I would tend to agree. So as we wrap up, I want to encourage you, if you're interested in it, check out CamdenDiocese.org for our information about our job fair on November 10th. You'll meet a whole bunch of great people who will, I hope, inspire you to join the church. And even if you don't come to that job fair, keep an eye out for other church work, because it's quite fulfilling. So everyone, thank you very much for joining me today, and to our listeners, thank you as well, and we'll be talking to you again next week. Thanks, everybody.